Hi, Dinosaur Bob here. In the last installment, we laid out the structures and area around the Bugbear's Head Inn. Today, we're going to put some people in place to staff the inn, smithy, mill, and brewery that we created. So let's get started. We'll do this by first identifying what it is we need the Bugbear's Head Inn to provide in order to be a good base for adventuring, at least at lower levels. Then we'll add the people themselves, keeping in mind the needs of an adventuring party to ensure that we cover all the bases, or at least have an opportunity to cover all the bases. The first basic needs of any creature are food and shelter. We don't have to spend too much time discussing how an inn is going to provide these. It should be pretty obvious. No matter what rule set you may wish to be playing in, the inn has been the classic home base for adventurers for years, and despite the cliche, probably will be for many more years. But we've designed the Bugbear's Head Inn so that not only does it have the usual collection of rooms above the common room, it also has the cabins in the back. This gives a new adventuring party an opportunity for a semi-private home that it can call its own. If the party arrives at the inn on game day 1 already formed, they could rent a cabin right off the bat. Alternatively, they could meet in the common room for the first time after coming from their various originating points, and after their first meeting, they can decide to try an adventure or two together, and if they choose to stay together and stay in this area, then they can rent a cabin. We've given the party options. As for food, the inn provides a hearty breakfast and dinner, and light snack food at any other time of day, so the party shouldn't go hungry between adventures. This brings us to the next important service that we're building into the inn, a source of information about adventures. Traders, merchants, mercenaries, and pilgrims can all find themselves on the road passing the inn, and any of these could mean work for an adventuring party. In addition, a feature of the inn not mentioned in the last video is a community board on the wall in the northeast corner of the common room, just inside the entry door, where the locals can post help wanted notes. Informations about hazards of the area can also be posted there. With a little upfront work from the GM, having a few items on the board will allow a fledgling party to actually choose an adventure that appeals to them. Once the group decides to head out on an adventure, they'll need some supplies. They will hopefully have a lot of real basics in their starting kit, but we can make a few other things available at the inn in a couple of ways. Rations are an easy and obvious one. Other odds and ends, like lanterns, lamp oil, and ropes, could either be available on a very limited basis, or perhaps even on loan from the owners. Or perhaps a passing tinker trader may show up from time to time with the little things like pots and pans and empty sacks that an adventuring party needs. Next, we get into things that would be needed if the party is going to stay around the area for more than an adventure or two. Foremost on that list is a way to repair equipment. And this is why we've added the smith across the road, banging the dents out of armor, re-edging a nicked sword, providing new metal buckles for straps. A blacksmith can be a valuable resource. Some items like arrowheads and iron spikes, perhaps even a hand axe or two, could even be purchased for a reasonable price. This isn't going to be the local weapon shop, but it should allow the party to keep their starting equipment in good repair. And finally, we'd like our home base to have a good reason to provide a few other, less common goodies than an adventuring party might need. We will be populating our inn complex with the ability to provide a few of these. The brewery and distillery across the road could also be a source of simple healing potions and antitoxins. One or more of the inn's NPCs should be capable of basic first aid and wound care. They're on their own a week from the nearest village, after all. The smith may even have knowledge and skills to imbue a weapon with simple magical enhancements. So that's the list of all of the things that we want to have available at the Bugbear's Head Inn to make it a good base camp for our new adventurers. So now let's take a look at the NPCs themselves that will make all of this come to life. For a start, let's introduce Theodric and Branwyne Pinnman, the owners of the Bugbear's Head Inn. They're both former members of a light mercenary company called the Merchant Minders. They met when they were assigned to the same caravan team that provided simple protection and support for traders along the roads in the frontier region. It was on the last of these missions that Theodric fought and killed the leader of a bugbear group that was terrorizing a river nymph at this very point in the Feywood. In fact, it is the severed skull of that same bugbear that adorns the mantle in the common room today. In accordance with human custom, when they married, they combined their surnames to form a new name for the family. Before marrying, Theodric's surname was Goodman, and Branwyne's was Pinnock. They both agreed that Pinnman sounded better than Goodnick. Today, Theodric and Branwyne are the full-time hosts of the inn. They can be found serving behind the bar, leading guests to their rooms, or just hanging around seeing to the comfort of their guests. They know everybody that lives within a week's travel of the inn, and are also familiar with the various merchants, traders, traveling clerics, etc. that frequent the trail. This makes them a valuable source of information. From a game mechanics standpoint, Theodric is a 5th level fighter, Branwyne a 5th level ranger. Theodric is capable of also providing training tips for new fighters, and Branwyne can pass along some of her skills to teach a neophyte how to track and hunt in these forests, not to mention quite a few archery tips. When Theodric and Branwyne first announced their plans to their friends in the mercenary group, the first one to offer his assistance was the dwarf Tugrith Oakbraid. In addition to wielding his axe whenever needed, Tugrith was the company's blacksmith. His task was to make sure horses were well shod and wagons in good repair. But he had come to realize that he was not happy packing up a small portable forge into a wagon every evening. His dwarven blood instilled a longing for a real forge, a forge of his own. And his wife, who lived among her own family while he was on the road, which was most of the time, had been niggling him to think about settling down like a good dwarf for some time. So, when the small group set off to create their dream of an inn in the deep forest, Tugrith, his wife Dunny Barrelmane, and their newborn son Dugrith, who was born just days after the mercenaries returned to Dryad Falls after their eventful journey, were all among the company. Upon arriving at the site, Tugrith's first action after basic shelter for his family was dealt with was to build a rudimentary forge for himself. This proved quite valuable as the group constructed the inn, as was Tugrith's strength and his work ethic. Once the inn was built, he then set about building a proper dwarf home for his family, and then a proper and permanent forge. In the 20-odd years since arriving, he's gotten the home and forge to where he and his wife are happy, and he has started teaching the art of the forge to his son. In addition to providing basic services such as shoeing horses and repairing wagons for travelers using the inn, Tugrith was also the unofficial and rather formidable bouncer for the inn's common room. In the handful of times that it was needed in the 20-odd years since the inn opened, he has also been quite capable of wielding his axe in battle. And fortunately, he has learned to manage the battle thrill that wells up within him whenever a confrontation occurs. His skills at the forge are now far beyond the odd horseshoe as well. In the considerable downtime between repair tasks for residents and patrons of the inn, he has been refining his talents at armor and weaponsmithing. He has a small collection of swords and axes available, and is capable of constructing basic armor for a reasonable price. His dwarven heritage has also granted him the skills needed to deal with the simplest of enchantments to reinforce weapons and armor. From a game mechanics standpoint, Tugrith is a 5th level barbarian, customized in a way to permit him to control his rages. His crafter and artisan background is dedicated to forge work. Another member of the Merchant Minder caravan team that has been part of the Bugbear's Head Inn since its inception is the gnome Wizbirit Canunkit. Wiz, as he was commonly called, was the team's cook and medic. In addition to the tinker abilities that most gnomes seem to possess, he has some training in herbalism and simple alchemy. But his love is machines, and the bigger or noisier, the better. And like Tugrith the dwarf, Wisberit had a wife living in Dryad's Falls, alone most of the time while he was on the road. And while she enjoyed the activity of town life, her roots made her long for greener surroundings and closer contact to the living forest that was so close and yet so far for a resident of Dryad's Falls. Both Wisberit and his wife, Madelbass Ginball, were therefore among the party that set out to turn Theodric's dream of a roadside inn in the deep forest into a reality. They would be quite important to this effort, as Madelbass possessed the knowledge of brewing ales, fermenting wines, and distilling spirits, all things that any good inn needs in great supply. And so, even as the inn was being built, Wisberit was constructing the brewing and fermenting vats, as well as the still that the inn would rely on. A year or two after the inn got started, Wisberit decided that a small grain mill using the stream and a water wheel for power would also be worthwhile and fun for him to build. And to this day, Madelbass keeps the inn well stocked, while Wisberit tinkers with the mill and the still, refining their designs and making improvements all the time. From a game mechanics standpoint, both Wisberit and Madelbass are 5th level alchemists or artisans, whatever a particular rule set happens to call it. They are capable of preparing basic healing and antitoxin potions. Wisberit has also been known to brew up an occasional concoction capable of going boom. Both are also well-trained herbalists, and both have skills involving medicines and basic wound care. 5 years ago, a scrawny, starving goblin came out of the woods to raid the inn's vegetable garden. The inn's cook took pity on the pathetic thing, though, and instead of driving him off, she sort of adopted him. Fricks the goblin has been around ever since. He does odd jobs, keeps the place tidy, that sort of thing, and his tinker skills serve him adequately. As is typical for a goblin, he is always almost but not quite underfoot. Because he often goes unnoticed, though, he hears things and passes them on to the Pinnmans. He is constantly on the lookout for useful things, which can range from odd-shaped rocks to lost valuables around the inn and in the forests beyond. It should be noted, though, that he never actually steals things from either the residents of the inn or the guests at the inn. He also seems to have a knack for opening locks without keys. From a game mechanics standpoint, Fricks is a 5th level rogue. He's got basic thieving skills, though as noted, he never actually steals from the people around the inn. But he would be happy to help an adventuring party by opening a locked chest or jewelry box that they bring back from an adventure, or overhearing conversations involving suspicious patrons of the inn. There are a few others besides these key service providers that are also worth a mention. First, Theodric and Branwyne have 4 kids, and 2 of them actually have jobs around the inn. Their eldest daughter, Elabeth, is 17. She works in the tavern common room and does some maid service for the rooms above. She's also got some natural musical talent. She has a lovely voice and can play the lute, so she sometimes entertains in the common room. From a game mechanics standpoint, we're going to call her a 1st level bard. Ranulf, age 15, is the inn's stable boy, though he prefers to be called the stable manager. He tends the horses and the wagons that are housed there and keeps the stable presentable. Ranulf has no game mechanic class just yet, but he has been learning basic self-defense skills from his father and hunting, tracking, and archery skills from his mother. So we may in the future make him either a 1st level fighter or a 1st level ranger. 2 younger kids, Jolene, age 12, and Bartlebert, age 9, will run an errand or 2, but otherwise they're just typical kids. We've already introduced Tugrith's wife, Dunny Berylmain. Dunny has no adventuring experience. She helps Branwyne and the others around the inn, keeping things orderly. We've also mentioned that Tugrith and Dunny have a son named Dugrith, currently 22 years old, which is still a youngster for a dwarf. Dugrith is his father's apprentice, learning forgecraft from his father, If needed, he can function as a first-level barbarian or fighter. Wizbeard and Madelbass have no kids, and Frix the Goblin lives alone as well, so no families to add there. But there is one more important family around the inn. The halflings Agilbert and Clotilde Oldbuck, and their 3 children. Agilbert tends the small vegetable garden and the even smaller flower plots around the inn. He spends his evenings trying to outdrink Tugrith. Clotilde is the inn's chef, though she prefers cook. Chef sounds too high and mighty for her. She runs the kitchen like a drill sergeant, and Theodric and Branwyne are fine with that because her food is legendary in the Feywood. At ages 95 and 91 years old respectively, they're starting to look a little weathered, but by halfling standards they're no more than late middle age. Agilbert and Clotilde have been married for 15 years and have 3 kids. Marmadoc, aged 14, Caramella, aged 11, and Rotrude, aged 8. None of the halfling family has any game mechanic character class associated with them. And that pretty much covers it. We fully staffed the inn. There are still a couple of NPCs that we'll need to flesh out, including the Nereid Daphinia, the water nymph saved by Theodric, who still lives in the area, and some of her kin as well. But in the next installment, we're going to go back to some world-level details that we need to lay out calendars and timekeeping. This is also going to lead us to a bit of discussion about the heavenly bodies that are in the skies above Cartyrion. I've got a couple of surprises in store there, but you'll have to wait for the next video to find out what they are. And until then, may the dice be with you.